In an effort to renew and deepen their partnership, the African Union and European Union kick off the 2022 EU-AU Summit in Brussels with Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari, along with about 39 other African leaders in attendance. The two-day gathering was initially planned for 2020, but was postponed due to the coronavirus pandemic and agenda issues. It will be the first time EU and African Union leaders have met in this format since 2017. The pandemic, migration and security will form part of key topics during the summit, and eyes are on this latest meeting to see if it will help reshape the relationship between the two international organizations.
Africa-EU summit that is coming up would be a space where our African leaders clearly articulate a strategy for AU-EU engagement that in this particular case looks at how we collectively respond to the pandemic. How our collective response to the pandemic is grounded in solidarity and trust. But it's very difficult to see how that will happen in the current environment. This is the same EU, you will remember, that not so long ago, just a few months ago, imposed a blanket travel ban on the people of these leaders' country. History is littered with these treaties, with these summit declarations, with these statements of support and solidarity and brotherhood and North-South relationship building. It means nothing if Africans are going to continue living in sickness, in poverty, in inequality, facing the absolute violence of an unjust system that has resulted in communities being decimated by a pandemic that they did not have to be decimated by if we had courageous leadership. So our call to those leaders, those African leaders attending the AU-EU summit is, if you are unable to find your voice thus far in the pandemic, find it now. The Europeans negotiated better when it came to the prices of vaccines. This is the group of people that we must have hope in. It's very difficult to see that hope. And it's difficult to see that hope in the absence of a strategy. It's difficult to see that hope with over $100 billion earmarked for EU initiatives in Africa. When do we set the agenda? When do we begin to turn the power around? When do we begin to set our terms of engagement and say this far and no more? If a pandemic where thousands of Africans have died has not compelled and pushed our African leaders to a point where they find their voices, what will?
For more on this summit, we can cross live to London, where Arise News correspondent Lape Olarinoye joins us for more on this story. Welcome, Lape. Thank you for joining us. This summit has been a long time coming. What will be the main points of difference between the two unions?
Hi, good afternoon to you all. Well, Howard, it's a good question you asked there. I mean, there are going to be a few contentious places where the African Union and, of course, the European Union will essentially have to meet halfway on, particularly the fact that it's been a long time coming. It's been 5 years since they last met. I mean, the main reason has been the pandemic, because it was originally arranged for 2020, but there have been other issues there. I mean, there have been a lot of geopolitical tug of wars going on between, of course, the EU and then, of course, China, Russia and Turkey for what I would describe as a kind of neo-scramble for Africa yet again. And if we look more closely at the summit and some of the agendas that will be brought up there, the one on the top of the list is, of course, the vaccine. I know if you cast your mind back to last year when there was a series of travel bans that somehow were fixated on mainly African countries who ironically had some of the lowest cases of the coronavirus, President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa stated that there was a vaccine apartheid going on, predominantly because they weren't giving kind of the intellectual property to manufacture new ones. And they also were at the bottom of the barrel in terms of who was going to get the vaccines in Africa. If we look at the numbers as well, Europe has had the majority of its population boosted even. And if we look at Africa, it's only 0.5% of the population has even had their first jab. So the disparities are extremely wide. And of course, the African Union is going to come with a lot more bargaining power to the summit this time around. The second, of course, is the investment and the partnerships that we're seeing between the two unions. Typically and historically, the European Union are known to kind of throwing money at Africa and kind of leaving it as that. But now Africa, the African Union is really going to have to ask and request for a lot more bargaining power, a lot more expansion and influence, as we're seeing from other parts of the world. So those are at the top two issues that will be of contention really at the summit.
So what are some of the possible outcomes of the summit?
Well, it depends who you're asking, really. On the side of the European Union, they have already pledged to donate about I wouldn't say donate, invest about 150 billion euros into an investment partnership. This sounds very cliche. We've heard it before. We've seen it before. But actually, in answer to your question, the African Union is going to demand for more of a credibility, for more responsibility from the European Union. If you are going to invest that sum of money, what are you going to do with it, and how is it going to benefit Africans and Africa at large? And I think that is why this summit is a long time coming. I mean, the relationships are quite frayed between the two unions, and so it's high time that Africa really put their foot down and ask for more. Of course, if you look at the way in which things are happening in Africa at the moment, there's a lot more investment. We know that, the initiative from China, Russia, and Turkey, but it's a very different model from what the Europeans have always been proposing and bringing to Africa. So the European Union really does have to do a lot of buying back, a lot of relationship mending during this summit. And I think actually the African Union is in a much better position to negotiate something better.
All right, briefly, could we see an improved relationship between the EU and the AU following the summit?
Again, it's one of those questions, Aaron. It's one of the time will tell question. If we look at history, probably not, because of the way in which the relationship has happened. But if the European Union is compelled to change that because of this, what I describe as an economic proxy battle between the EU and, of course, the Russia and China, there may be more of a compulsion to make sure that there's a better outcome, particularly because it's not only just a battle of business and economics. It's actually a battle for also the way in which we're governed. I mean, China and Russia are making grounds across Africa. And of course, the European Union wants to fight against that, which is why they have to do a lot of relationship fixing during this summit. But I think either way, it's a win-win for Africa in terms of what they bargain for. Of course, the question is, how well are they going to bargain?
Lakme Olarinoye, thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.